My aunt left me her house. Her own son tried to steal it. He had no idea she'd already set a trap, and he walked straight into it. 3 days after we buried my aunt, we sat in her living room while the lawyer read her will out loud. Her son, my cousin Marcus, heard one sentence, stood up and laughed in my face. He said it twice, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "A piece of paper doesn't scare me. That house belongs to me." 8 days later, he filed a lawsuit. He walked out before the lawyer could finish reading. That was the most expensive exit of his life, and he had absolutely no idea. Stay with me, because what my aunt built before she died, quietly, carefully, over one single winter, is something Marcus never saw coming. And neither did I. Quiet endings for people who were never the loudest one in the room, but were always the one who actually showed up. If a calm kind of justice is what you came for, you're in exactly the right place. Drop a comment right now and tell me, have you ever been the one who stayed while everyone else disappeared? Hit subscribe so you don't miss where this goes. Because I promise you, you want to see how this ends. Let me tell you who I am, because Marcus spent 5 months telling a courtroom a completely different version. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm a hospice nurse. I sit with people in the last rooms of their lives. I keep them comfortable when nothing else can be fixed anymore. I'm good at it. I learned it the hard way, working nights, paying off my training one shift at a time, saying yes to every extra patient because saying no wasn't something I knew how to do. 4 years ago, my aunt's heart started to give out. Her name was Eleanor Marsh. She was 80 years old when I moved into her craftsman house on Birchwood Lane to take care of her, 84 when she died. She left the porch light on for me every night I worked late, a little amber bulb above the front steps so I'd never come home to a dark house. I used to text her when I was on my way. She'd text back one word, on. That was the porch light. That was Eleanor. People assume a caretaker is soft, a doormat, someone who can't hold a line. That wasn't what this was. I knew how to hold a boundary at work. The problem was I'd never once held one for myself. I said yes to every double shift, every extra patient, every favor asked of me. I had no life outside the people I was keeping alive. Eleanor saw that better than I did. One evening near the end, she took my hand and said something I didn't understand yet. "I've made sure no one can take this from you." I thought she meant the rocking chair, the garden. I told her not to worry. I had no idea she'd already spent an afternoon at a lawyer's office building something none of us could see. Here's the thing about the rest of the family. They didn't disappear. They just never really showed up. Eleanor's son, Marcus Marsh, lived 40 minutes away. He came by once or twice a year, usually around the holidays, usually for an hour. His wife Diane came with him and spent most of the visit looking at the house instead of the woman in it. She'd run a hand along the banister and ask in a casual voice whether the roof had ever been replaced. Their daughter, my cousin Kayla, came even less, but she posted plenty. Every few months, a photo of Eleanor would appear on her feed. Sundays with Grandma. Treasure these moments. With a date stamp that didn't match any visit I remembered. The comments loved it. I never said anything. I just kept changing the sheets and filling the pill organizer. The thing I keep coming back to happened maybe 2 years before the end. Marcus was standing in the living room with his phone out, and I realized he was measuring it, pacing the wall, thumb moving across the screen the way you do before you buy furniture. He caught me watching and grinned. "Just curious," he said, "for when it's mine someday." My aunt was sitting 6 feet away in her chair. She heard every word. She didn't argue, didn't frown, didn't say a thing. She just smiled at her son, a small private smile, and went back to her crossword. Looking back now, that smile was the first move in a game the rest of us couldn't see yet. She'd already decided something. She just wasn't ready to tell anyone what. If you're new here, this is the kind of story we tell on this channel. Not shouting, not chaos, just the quiet version of justice. The kind where a careful woman does one thing right, and it protects someone she loves long after she's gone. Comment below. I stayed. If you were the one who showed up for someone when no one else did. I read every single one. And keep watching, because what Eleanor did in that lawyer's office? We haven't even gotten there yet. In her last winter, Eleanor got quieter, more deliberate. She had a brass house key on a faded blue ribbon, the ribbon worn soft from 40 years of being looped over the same hook by the door. One afternoon, she lifted it off the hook and pressed it into my palm. She folded my fingers over it. "This stays with you," she said. I tried to give it back. I told her I had my own key, that hers should stay by the door where it belonged. She wouldn't take it. "You're not hearing me," she said. "It stays with you." I thought she was confused, the way patients sometimes are near the end. She wasn't confused at all. The following week, a car came for her in the morning and brought her back by lunch. She'd gone to see a lawyer named Walter Crane, a man she'd known since before I was born. She didn't tell me what they discussed. All she said, settling back into her chair with her coffee, was, "I've made it so no one can take it from you. It's done now." I asked her what she meant. She patted my hand and changed the subject to whether the hydrangeas would come back in spring. I let it go. I figured it was paperwork. The boring kind. The kind that doesn't matter until it does. I had a patient across town and I was already late. I dropped the brass key into the dish by my bed and didn't think about it for months. I should have asked, but she knew exactly what she was doing, and she didn't need my help to do it. The death and what came after. Eleanor died on a Tuesday in early March. Her own bed. Porch light on. I was holding her hand. By the standards of my profession, it was a good death. Quiet, unafraid, at home. I won't dress it up for you. I'd kept 100 strangers comfortable through that exact moment. It turns out it lands very differently when it's the woman who raised you. I sat with her a long time before I called anyone. Then I made the calls, and the family arrived. And within an hour, Eleanor's death stopped being mine. Marcus took over. He stood in the kitchen giving orders about the funeral home, the obituary, the flowers, as though he'd been running the household all along, instead of measuring it for resale. Diane walked the room slowly, arms crossed, doing the math. At the funeral, Marcus gave a eulogy about a mother he barely visited. People cried. Afterward, he shook hands at the door like the host of the event. I stood near the back. Kayla posted a black and white photo with a long caption about loss. I didn't have it in me to be angry yet. Grief takes up the whole house when it first moves in. There's no room for anything else. But underneath it, quiet and cold, was a problem I couldn't ignore much longer. Birchwood Lane was the only home I had. My whole adult life had folded itself into these rooms, into this woman, into the routine of taking care of her. Now she was gone, and the people circling the house had never once asked where I was supposed to go. I thought the hardest part was behind me. It hadn't even started. We're about to get to the will reading, and I need you to stay with me here. Because what happens in that living room in the next 5 minutes sets off a chain of events that my aunt planned for years in advance. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because the part where Marcus finds out what his lawsuit actually cost him, that's still coming, and you will not see it coming either. Let's go. 3 days after the funeral, Walter Crane came to the house. He was close to 70. Careful, soft-spoken, the kind of man who reads every word because words are the only thing he trusts. We sat in the living room, the same room Marcus had once paced with his phone. Crane put on his glasses and began. The estate was modest but real. The house, free and clear. Plus a savings account and some certificates of deposit Eleanor had quietly been feeding for 30 years. He read the first major bequest, the house on Birchwood Lane, and the bulk of the remaining estate. Went to me. I heard Diane's breath go sharp. Marcus's face changed color. Crane kept reading, calm as a man reading a grocery list. There was a specific cash gift, he said, of $75,000, set aside for Marcus Marsh. And then he read the line. Any beneficiary who contests this will or aids any contest of it shall take nothing under it, and their gift shall pass as if they had not survived me. He read it slowly. He read it twice, because Eleanor had instructed him to. Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He'd stopped at the house goes to Claire, and everything after that was noise. He stood so fast the chair scraped back. His face was the deep red of a man who believes he has just been robbed. He pointed at the document in Crane's hands like it had insulted him. "That's a joke," he said. "She wasn't in her right mind. That girl got to her." Then he laughed, an ugly little bark, and said the thing I would hear in my head for the next 5 months. "A piece of paper won't stop me. That house is mine." He walked out before Crane could finish the page. He never heard the $75,000. He never heard the rest. They came back that night. Marcus and Diane standing under the porch light, and Diane did most of the talking. She was good at it. Years of practice behind the voice she used now, warm and wounded at the same time. We don't want to fight, Claire. We just want what's fair. Fair, in her telling, was simple. I had moved into a vulnerable old woman's home. I had isolated her, flattered her, worn her down, and walked away with everything while her own blood got crumbs. "You worked a dying woman?" Marcus said over her shoulder. "Everyone can see what you did." I stood in the doorway and didn't let them in. My hands were steady. I noticed that almost from a distance, the way I notice a patient's pulse. "I took care of her," I said. "That's all." Diane smiled like I'd just proven her point. "You're not even a Marsh," she said. "Blood is blood. You're a Donovan." That part was technically true. My mother was Eleanor's niece by marriage. My last name came from a father who left when I was small. To them, it was the whole argument. To me, it was just a fact about a name. I told them good night and closed the door. That night, Kayla opened a group chat with 30 relatives I barely knew and pinned a message at the top for everyone asking what happened to Grandma's house. Underneath it, the story took shape fast, the way a lie does when nobody in the room knows the truth and everybody wants the gossip. I muted the chat. I didn't defend myself. I told myself silence was dignity. It would take me a while to understand it was also a weapon, and that Eleanor had already loaded it. Within 2 weeks, I was alone in a way I hadn't expected. Neighbors who'd eaten at Eleanor's table went quiet. Not hostile, just absent. The careful absence of people who don't want to pick a side. Kayla's posts kept coming. She never used my name. She didn't have to. Some people see a sick old woman and see an opportunity. Caretakers know exactly what they're doing. The comments filled in the rest. I'd walk into the grocery store and feel the temperature of the room change. And here's the part I'm not proud of. I almost gave it to them. I sat at Eleanor's kitchen table one night with the brass key in my hand, and I seriously considered signing the house over to Marcus just to make it stop. Not because I doubted she meant to leave it to me, because keeping people comfortable was the only setting I had. I'd spent my whole life smoothing things over for everyone but myself. The pull to do it again was almost physical. I actually drafted the text to Crane. Maybe it's easier if I just let them have it. My thumb hovered over send. Then I looked up, through the kitchen window, at the porch light. Still burning, the way she'd left it for me 1,000 nights. And I couldn't do it. I deleted the message and wrote a different one. "Can we talk? They're saying I manipulated her. I don't know what to do." Crane called me back inside a minute. His voice was unhurried, almost gentle. "Before you decide anything," he said, "come to my office tomorrow. There are some things Eleanor wanted you to know. And now is the time." I didn't sleep that night. What Eleanor had actually built in that lawyer's office, while I was at work, while I thought she was just doing paperwork, we're about to find out. And I need you to understand, she didn't just write a will. She built a trap that only closes if the wrong person reaches for it. Keep watching. The next part changes everything. Walter Crane's office smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. He sat me down, slid a thick folder across the desk, and told me what Eleanor had spent her last good winter doing. She had not just written a will. She had built a wall. The will was drafted by Crane himself, not a form off the internet. It was signed in his conference room in front of 2 independent witnesses with no stake in anything, a retired school teacher and Crane's own paralegal. And the week she signed, Eleanor had done one more thing. She'd asked her physician, a Dr. Patricia Ozzie, who had treated her for 9 years, to examine her and write a letter. The letter stated in plain medical language that Eleanor Marsh was of sound mind, that she understood the nature and extent of her property, that she knew exactly who her relatives were, and that she was making her decisions freely, without pressure from anyone. Dated. Signed. Notarized. Crane tapped the folder. "Your aunt told me someone would try to break this," he said. "She wanted to make sure they couldn't." I asked him what the line meant, the one Marcus had laughed at. Crane explained it the way you'd explain a trap to someone standing safely outside it. A no-contest clause, he said. In our state, courts will enforce a clause like this when someone challenges a will without a real basis for the fight. If they lose, they don't just fail. They forfeit whatever the will left them in the first place. I sat there turning it over. But the house came to me, I said. What does Marcus have to lose? Crane looked at me for a long moment over his glasses. That, he said, is the part he didn't stay to hear. 8 days after the will reading, a process server knocked on my door and handed me an envelope. Marcus had filed a petition to contest the will. Grounds: undue influence. The story inside the papers was the same one Diane had told on the porch, and Kayla had told online, just dressed in legal clothes. I had isolated Eleanor. I had manipulated a frail, dependent woman into rewriting her wishes. The document asked the court to throw out the will entirely and distribute the estate as justice requires. In Marcus's mind, justice required the house go to him. He had hired a lawyer named Phil Garrett, a strip mall litigator who advertised on bus benches and took cases by the hour. No contingency, no big firm betting on a win. Marcus was paying out of pocket on a retainer he'd scraped together by refinancing what little equity he had left. I called Crane. He filed, I said. I know, Crane said. Don't respond to anything. Don't sign anything. Let me handle the estate. And Holly, whatever you do, don't try to fix this for him. I want to be fair to Marcus. More fair than he was to me, because the truth is more interesting than a cartoon. He wasn't suing because he was rich and greedy. He was suing because he was broke and scared. His contracting business had collapsed. He was 58 with a second mortgage he couldn't carry and no real plan for the back half of his life. The house on Birchwood Lane wasn't a memory to him, it was a lifeboat. I knew all this, and for one afternoon it almost softened me. I remembered being 9 years old and Marcus fixing the chain on the backyard swing, lying in the grass with a wrench, letting me hand him tools. He'd been kind once, in the offhand way of a young man who had time and money, and no idea he'd run out of both. I sat with that memory for a while. Then I opened the group chat I'd muted and read what he'd written about me that morning. She's a professional. She does this to old people. We're not the first family she's robbed. He'd typed that about the woman who'd changed his mother's sheets for 4 years. Whatever softness I'd felt closed like a door. That's the thing nobody tells you about people who hurt you. They can be human and still choose the cruelty. Marcus was frightened. I understood his fear. And he still picked up that fear and threw it at me. Because I was the easiest target in the room. Understanding why a man does something is not the same as forgiving him for it. I closed the chat. I didn't write back. I had finally stopped explaining myself. The quiet felt like the first solid ground I'd stood on in weeks. He showed up at my door the following week. He wanted the key. Not a key. The key. The brass one on the blue ribbon. And what I said to him, standing in my doorway in my scrubs on the way to a patient. I'm not going to say it was the kindest thing I've ever done, but it was the truest. Stay with me. Because the letter is still coming. The letter Eleanor wrote and sealed and told Crane to only give me if someone contested. That letter is the part of this story I think about the most. Marcus showed up without warning. His truck in the driveway at 8 in the morning. He wanted the brass key on the blue ribbon. I don't know how he even knew about it. Maybe he'd seen it on the hook over the years. Maybe Diane remembered it. Give it here, he said. We both know how this ends. That house is mine. I stood in the doorway in my scrubs, on my way to a patient, and felt something settle in me that hadn't been there in March. It's not mine to give, and it's not yours to take, I said. A judge decides that now. He stepped closer. A piece of paper won't stop me. The same words, like a man who only knows one sentence. I held his eyes. Then you don't need the key, I said. You'll have the whole house soon. It was the closest I came to cruelty in all of this. And I'm not sorry. He didn't have an answer. So I added one more thing. Because some part of me still hadn't fully given up on him. Go talk to a real lawyer, Marcus. Not the bus bench guy, a real one. Before you do something you can't take back. He laughed in my face. Don't manage me, he said. I know what I'm doing. He didn't. And that was the last time I tried to tell him. 2 days later, Crane called me back to his office. He had something for me, he said. Something that couldn't be sent in the mail. When I arrived, he didn't slide a folder across the desk. He set down a single envelope, cream-colored, sealed. My name on the front, in Eleanor's handwriting. The handwriting alone nearly undid me. Crane folded his hands. She wrote this the same week she signed the will. Her instruction was specific. I was to hold it and give it to you only if someone contested, not before. I asked why. He shook his head slowly. She didn't want you reading it unless you needed it. She told me, and I'm quoting her, "If Marcus leaves it alone, Claire never has to know what I knew about my own son." I held the envelope. I could feel the shape of a folded page inside. I asked Crane if he knew what it said. "I don't," he told me. "I drafted the will. I didn't write her letters." He stood, his polite way of giving me the room. "Read it when you're ready, but read it. She didn't write it to be left in a drawer." I took it home. I set it on the kitchen table under the window where the porch light came through at night. And I looked at it for a long time before I could bring myself to break the seal. Some part of me already knew that whatever was inside would change the way I understood the whole thing. I opened that letter, and Eleanor told me, from the far side of death, that she had seen every single thing coming. She hadn't just hoped Marcus would leave it alone, she had planned for when he wouldn't. And the $75,000 she left him, that was never just a gift. It was the last test she ever gave him. Keep watching. We're almost at the hearing. And the moment Marcus finds out what he threw away, that moment is worth every second you've spent with this story. My grandmother told me from the far side of death that she had seen all of this coming. The first line was so plainly her that I could hear her voice. "Claire, if you're reading this, Marcus did the thing I prayed he wouldn't." She wrote like she talked. Short sentences, no wasted words. She knew her son. She'd watched him circle the house for years, watched him measure the living room, watched him love things more easily than people. So when she made the will, she made a choice she wanted me to understand. She did not cut Marcus out. She left him $75,000. Real money. More than enough to clear the second mortgage and breathe. "I left him a door," she wrote. "A good one. If he walked through it like a son, he'd have been fine." But she knew her son, so she built the door with a lock. The no contest clause wasn't there to punish anyone. It was a test, the last one she'd ever give him. If Marcus accepted what she'd left him, he kept it. The house stayed mine. The family held together as well as it ever had. If he grabbed for more, the law would take back even the $75,000, and he would have done it to himself. "I'm not stealing from him," she wrote. "I'm giving him exactly one chance to be the man I hoped for." And then the line I have not been able to forget. "I didn't leave you out, Marcus. You left first." I read the letter 4 times, and as I read it, the whole shape of what was coming snapped into focus, cold and clear. Marcus was about to throw away $75,000 he didn't even know he had, and I was the only living person who could warn him. I called Crane the next morning. "He doesn't know about the $75,000, I said. "If he knew, he'd drop the suit. Don't I have to tell him?" Crane was quiet for a second. Then he answered carefully, like a man stepping across ice. "Legally, no. You have no duty to advise the man who is currently suing you." I started to argue. He let me run out. Then he said the part that actually mattered. "Claire, think about what happens if you do tell him. You walk up to the man accusing you of manipulating his mother and start managing his lawsuit for him. How does that look in front of a judge?" I sat with it. It looked exactly like what they had already accused me of. "And there's this," Crane said. "You already tried. You told him to get a real lawyer. He laughed at you. That was your warning. He spent it. He was right. And I hated that he was right. I'd stood on my own porch and told Marcus plainly to be careful before he did something he couldn't undo. He'd told me not to manage him. So I wouldn't. I'd spent 4 years keeping people comfortable, easing every hard landing, absorbing everyone's fear so they wouldn't have to carry it. This time, the comfort wasn't mine to give. Eleanor had built this on purpose, and she had asked me in writing to let it run its course. I folded her letter back into its envelope and put it in the drawer by the door, next to the brass key. "Okay," I told Crane. "I'll let it run." Saying it out loud felt less like revenge and more like finally setting something down. I'd been carrying other people my whole life. I was done carrying Marcus. The lawsuit moved into discovery. Phil Garrett, Marcus's bus bench lawyer, went looking for evidence that I'd manipulated Eleanor. Medical records, financial statements, anything showing control or isolation. He was fishing. The pond was empty, because nothing had happened. But meanwhile, the estate side of the table was getting heavier every week. And Marcus? Marcus was still paying by the hour, digging in a hole with nothing at the bottom. If you've been watching since The Hook, you already know where this is going. But the way it actually lands, it's better than you think. Let's finish this. Dr. Osei's capacity letter sat at the top of the file like a closed door. The two witnesses confirmed they'd watched Eleanor sign, lucid, certain, with no one whispering in her ear. And my own work created a record I hadn't even meant to keep. 4 years of careful nursing notes, dated detailed medication logs, appointment calendars, the unglamorous paper trail of a person being cared for. Not controlled. It read like exactly what it was. Out in the family, the story started to wobble too. Kayla's online campaign hit its peak, then began to slip, because the neighbors who'd gone quiet in March had been watching, and a few of them had longer memories than she'd counted on. A woman named Doris from 2 doors down left a single public comment under one of Kayla's posts. "I live next to that house. I saw who came and who didn't." Kayla deleted the post. It was the first crack. I didn't celebrate. I was learning that the loudest part of a thing is rarely the part that wins. The quiet file in Crane's office was doing more work than any comment ever could. And somewhere across town, Marcus was still paying by the hour to dig in a hole with nothing at the bottom. In late spring, Crane asked me to come in. "I'll be direct," he said. "Your cousin's contest is frivolous." He explained what that meant in practice, because to me, frivolous was just a word people used when they were annoyed. To a probate lawyer, it meant something specific and dangerous. A no contest clause doesn't always bite. If someone had a genuine, reasonable basis to challenge, the court won't enforce the forfeiture even if they lose. It's called probable cause, a safe harbor for honest doubts. But Marcus didn't have probable cause. He had a grudge, a theory, no evidence of incapacity, no evidence of undue influence, and a signed medical letter saying the opposite. Without that safe harbor, the clause would do exactly what Eleanor designed it to do. "So, if he loses," I said slowly, "he doesn't just lose the house he was never going to get?" Crane nodded. "He loses the $75,000 the will actually gave him." He let that sit. "And your aunt planned for that too. The will says anything a beneficiary forfeits drops into the residuary, the part that already comes to you. If he throws his gift away, it doesn't go to a stranger. It comes to you." I felt the full weight of it settle then. And it wasn't triumph. It was something closer to dread. Marcus thought he was fighting for a house. He was actually standing on a trapdoor he'd built himself, holding a check for $75,000 he didn't know existed. And every motion Garrett filed was tightening the rope. "He still doesn't know," I said. "No," Crane said, "and it's not your job to tell him." I drove home past Marcus's exit on the highway. I didn't take it. I didn't witness this part myself, but I believe every word of it, because it matches everything I know about all of them. Somewhere in early summer, after Discovery closed and Turned Up Nothing, Phil Garrett did the math. He sat Marcus down and told him the truth he should have heard in March. The will would hold. The medical letters shut down any argument about Eleanor's capacity. The witnesses, the care records, Marcus's own years of declined visits, they left the undue influence claim with nothing under it. And the no contest clause meant that if they pushed this to a ruling and lost, Marcus wouldn't walk away empty. He'd walk away in the negative. "There's money in that will for you," Garrett reportedly said. "Real money. If we drop this now, you keep it. If we lose, you forfeit it, and you owe me besides." It was the off-ramp, the last clean exit before the cliff. And Marcus, I'm told, actually wavered. For one evening at their kitchen table, he considered folding. Then Diane spoke. She'd put 2 years of hope into selling that house. $75,000 didn't clear their debts, didn't change their life, didn't give her the fresh start she'd been picturing. Only the house did that. "She's bluffing," Diane said. "That girl doesn't have the spine to take it all the way. Push." So they pushed. The one door Eleanor had left propped open, the one exit that would have saved them, Marcus pulled shut with his own hand, because his wife told him the woman across town would blink first. I would not blink. I didn't even know yet that the door had been open. By the time I heard about it, it was already closed, and the hearing was on the calendar. Before the hearing, there was mediation, a room, both families, a mediator at the head of the table. The offer on the table was simple. Give Marcus something, and it all goes away. The posts, the gossip, the grocery store temperature, and I'll tell you honestly, I wanted to take it. The old reflex stood up in me and stretched. Make it comfortable, smooth it over, give them something so nobody has to hurt. My whole life had trained me to be the one who folds so the room can relax, and the pull was so strong, I had to grip the edge of the table. Keep watching, because what I said in that mediation room, and who stopped me from folding, that's the part that finally made me understand what Eleanor had actually left me. We sat in a beige conference room downtown, both families at opposite ends of a long table. Crane beside me, Garrett beside Marcus. A mediator at the head. The offer was simple. I could hand Marcus something, a chunk of cash, a percentage, anything. And he'd drop the contest, and it would all just stop. And here's my confession. I wanted to take it. Not because I doubted the will, because the old reflex stood up in me and stretched. Make it comfortable. Smooth it over. Give them something so nobody has to hurt. My whole life had trained me to be the one who folds so the room can relax. The pull was so strong, I had to grip the edge of the table. Then I thought about Eleanor in that lawyer's office, 84 years old, spending one of her last clear afternoons building this exact protection so I'd never have to negotiate for what she'd freely given. Folding wouldn't honor her, it would erase her. I looked across the table at Marcus, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm not trying to punish him, I said, and I meant it. I'm just not going to rescue him from himself anymore. Crane told the mediator we declined. Garrett's jaw tightened. Diane made a sound like a laugh with no humor in it. We walked out into the parking lot and the air felt different in my lungs. Kayla caught me the following week. Produce aisle. A dozen people pretending not to listen. She'd clearly been waiting for an audience. I hope it was worth it, she said, loud. Taking everything from your own family. Grandma would be ashamed of you. A month earlier, that would have flattened me. Not anymore. I set down my bag of apples and looked at my cousin. Kayla, I said, calm, quiet, so people had to lean in to hear. When did you last visit her? She blinked. Before she died. When were you last in that house? Not a photo. In the house. She opened her mouth and nothing came out, because the honest answer was a number she didn't want to say in public. Then, something I didn't expect. A woman I half recognized, a friend of Doris's, spoke up from near the bananas. I never once saw you there, hun. I saw Claire's car every single day. Another voice, an older man by the registers. Eleanor talked about her niece, the nurse, all the time. Never mentioned the rest of you. The aisle had picked a side. It wasn't Kayla's. She went red, grabbed her cart, left without another word. I stood there with my apples and my heart going fast. Not from fear, from something cleaner. This was the asymmetry I was only beginning to understand. They fought with noise, posts, accusations, scenes in public. I didn't have to fight back with more noise. I just had to let the truth stand in a room full of people who'd been there. The truth didn't need volume, it only needed witnesses. The thing that truly ended the undue influence claim came from Marcus's own phone. Undue influence leans hard on isolation. The idea that the manipulator cut the victim off from family so they could work on her alone. Garrett had built his whole theory on it. The problem was that nobody had isolated Marcus from his mother. Marcus had isolated himself, and he'd done it in writing. In discovery, the estate obtained text messages between Marcus and Eleanor going back years. They were brutal in their ordinariness. Can't make it this weekend? Slammed at work. Tell Mom happy birthday for me. Can't get away. Maybe next month. Month after month. Year after year. An invitation declined. A visit postponed. A mother kept at arm's length by a son who was always too busy until the day there was money on the table. There was no one standing between Marcus and Eleanor except Marcus. His own thumbs had typed the proof that he'd let himself out. He'd spent 5 months telling a court I'd locked him out of his mother's life. Crane slid the printout across the desk. Page after page of can't, busy next time. For a moment, neither of us said anything. He wrote his own verdict. Crane finally said. Years ago. He just never read it back. The hearing was 3 weeks out. There was nothing left to find. The night before the hearing, a summer storm knocked out the power on Birchwood Lane. The whole block went dark, including the porch light. I stood at the window in the sudden black and felt the absence of it like a held breath. For 4 years, that little amber bulb had been the last thing I saw before sleep. Eleanor's one-word promise that I'd never come home to a dark house. Now it was out. The night before, everything. I wasn't going to leave it that way. Let's finish this together. The storm came through and knocked out the power on Birchwood Lane. I found the old storm lantern in the hall closet, the one Eleanor kept for exactly these nights, and I carried it out to the porch, set it on the rail where the bulb used to glow. I lit it by hand. The flame caught and steadied. The steps were warm with light again. I stood there in the rain smell with the lantern going and felt for the first time in months completely calm. I wasn't nervous about the hearing. I wasn't rehearsing speeches. There was nothing for me to say. Eleanor had already said it. In a lawyer's conference room. In a letter in my drawer. In $75,000 and one underlined line. Marcus still believed a piece of paper couldn't stop him. He was about to learn what paper does when a careful woman spends her last good winter making sure it will. I went to bed with the lantern lit on the porch. I slept all the way through. In the morning, the power was back. The bulb was burning again, like nothing had ever gone dark. I made coffee. I put on the one good blazer I owned. I drove downtown. The courtroom was smaller than the ones on television. Fluorescent and plain, a county seal on the wall. A judge named Harlan Voss, who had clearly seen 100 families do this to each other. I made one decision that surprised even Crane. I wasn't going to hire my own lawyer. Technically, I didn't need to. Defending the will was the estate's job, but Crane had asked carefully whether I wanted my own attorney in the room anyway, someone whose only client was me. I thought about it and said no. I didn't manipulate anyone. I don't need to act like someone who has to be defended. There was something else too, something I didn't fully say. Hiring a lawyer to fight Marcus would have made it a fight between him and me. Two people swinging at each other across a room. That wasn't what this was. I wasn't the one who'd done anything. The will would speak. The capacity letter would speak. His own text messages would speak. All I had to do was sit in that room as the person who'd actually been there and let the documents Eleanor left behind do the only arguing that mattered. I'm not going to argue with him, I told Crane. I'm going to let her do it. Garrett went first. He stood and laid out Marcus's theory with all the conviction a man can summon on an hourly rate. A devoted son, he said, shut out of his own mother's final years. A professional caretaker trained to read vulnerable people who moved into the home and slowly bent a frail woman's wishes toward herself. He used the word isolated 4 times. He used the word manipulated 6. It was a good story. The same story Diane had told on my porch and Kayla had told in the grocery store. And like both of those, it had one fatal flaw. There was no evidence under it. Judge Voss made a note, looked over his glasses at Crane, and said the words that started the part Marcus would replay for the rest of his life. Let's hear from the estate. Crane stood without hurry, the way he did everything, and didn't make a speech. He just handed the court the truth, one piece at a time, and let each piece land. The will, properly drafted, properly executed, signed before 2 disinterested witnesses present in the courtroom. Then Dr. Ozie's letter, read into the record, 9 years of treating Eleanor Marsh, a clear medical finding that she understood her property, her family, and her choices, and was acting under no one's pressure. I watched Judge Voss read it twice. Then Crane turned to the heart of Garrett's case, the isolation, and took it apart with Marcus's own phone. He entered the text messages. He didn't editorialize. He simply read them aloud. Flat voice, dates and all. March, can't make it, slammed at work. June, tell Mom happy birthday, can't get away. October, maybe next month. On and on. 2 years of a son declining the mother he now claimed had been stolen from him. The room got very quiet.